Ngozi stood up in the middle of the village meeting and said no. Not quietly. Not with her eyes down. Not with the hesitation of someone who is still deciding whether they mean it. She stood up straight with her hands at her sides and she said no in a voice that reached every corner of the open compound where 200 people had gathered and landed in the silence that followed like a stone dropped into still water. The whole village heard it. Chief Obiora heard it. His son Emeka, 26 years old, well-fed, educated in the city, returned to the village with city clothes and city confidence, heard it from across the compound and turned slowly to look at the girl who had just said no to the thing his father had announced. Ngozi was 16 years old. She had never spoken at a village meeting in her life. Nobody had expected her to speak at this one. Her mother grabbed her wrapper from behind and pulled. "Sit down," she hissed. "Ngozi. Sit down right now." Ngozi did not sit down. Chief Obiora was looking at her. 200 people were looking at her. The evening light was fading and the compound torches had been lit and the light fell on her face and she stood in it and did not move. "What did you say?" Chief Obiora asked. His voice was the voice of a man who was not accustomed to the question being necessary. "I said no, sir," Ngozi said. "I said no to the borehole. If you have ever watched one person stand up against something that everyone else accepted, drop a comment and tell us. And if you are new here, subscribe right now, because what this girl does next will shock you." The borehole decision had been 3 months in the making. An NGO from the city, Clean Water Initiative, had come to Omona village in February with a proposal. They would fund the construction of a new borehole for the community. One borehole, positioned in the center of the village at the main square, to replace the 3 seasonal streams that the women and children walk to every morning, some of them 40 minutes each way, to collect water. It sounded like good news. It was good news. But Ngozi had been paying attention, which was a particular habit and the thing that made her inconvenient to people who preferred that 16-year-old girls not pay too close attention to things. She had noticed, over the 3 months of discussions, that the proposed location of the borehole had quietly shifted. In February it was the main square. In March it was slightly east of the main square. By April the plans showed it positioned directly beside Chief Obiora's compound, which happened to be the largest compound in the village and happened to sit on the east side, which happened to be the side farthest from where the majority of the village women and children lived and walked and carried water every morning. Nobody at the meetings had said anything about this shift. Nobody except Ngozi, who had been sitting at the back of 3 different meetings watching the plans change and drawing a small map in the margin of her school notebook each time. She had gone to her father first. Her father, Mr. Okeke, was a quiet man who farmed yam and cassava and had never in his 48 years said anything at a village meeting that risked the comfort of the people who run things. He looked at his daughter's notebook map, at the 3 different positions marked in pencil, and he was quiet for a long time. "You see it," Ngozi said. "I see it," he said. "So you will say something at the meeting?" Another long quiet. "Ngozi. Baba, the women in Egu Quarter walk 45 minutes to the stream. If they move the borehole to Chief side, they will walk 50 minutes. The whole point." "I know what the whole point is." "Then say it." He looked at his hands. "Things are not that simple." "They are exactly that simple." "Ngozi." His voice was tired. "Chief Obiora is not a man you argue with lightly. Not in this village. Not over water," she said. "We are not arguing lightly over water." He had no answer for that. She had gone to her teacher next. Mr. Ifani, who taught mathematics and geography at Omona Community Secondary School and who was the most educated person Ngozi trusted. He listened to the whole thing. The 3 maps. The timeline of the shift. The distances. She had worked out the numbers, the difference in walking time for the 43 households in Egu Quarter, multiplied by 2 trips daily, multiplied by 365 days. She put the paper on his desk. He read it carefully. "This is excellent reasoning," he said. "Then someone should say something." He looked at her with the expression of a man who knew she was right and was about to tell her why he could not act on it. "I am a teacher here," he said. "I have a salary that depends on—" "I know," she said. She picked up her paper. "I know." She walked out of his office. She went home and sat in the kitchen while her mother cooked, and she thought about what it meant that the people who knew right from wrong kept finding reasons why the knowing was enough and the doing was someone else's job. Then she thought about the women of Egukwota. Mrs. Adana, who was 7 months pregnant and still walking to the stream twice a day because there was no choice. Old Mama Ezin, 73 years old, who sent her grandchildren with clay pots every morning because her niece would not manage the walk but the water still needed to come home. The children, 8, 9, 10 years old, missing the first period of school because the water trip ran long. She sat with all of it until her mother called her for dinner. Then she sat with it some more. The night before the meeting she could not sleep. She lay on her mat listening to the sounds of the village, a dog somewhere, the night insects, her father breathing slowly in the next room, her younger sister Adis muttering in her sleep, and she had the conversation with herself that needed to happen. "You are 16. Yes. You have never spoken at a village meeting. Yes. Chief Obiora has power in this village that goes back 3 generations. Yes. Your father is afraid. Your teacher is afraid. Every person who sees what you see has found a reason to be still. Yes. So what makes you think you should stand up?" She thought about Mrs. Adana walking to the stream 7 months pregnant. She thought about Mama Ezin's grandchildren missing school. She thought about 43 households and the difference between 45 minutes and 50 minutes when you are carrying water on your head every day of your life. She thought about what it means to see something clearly and say nothing. She turned over on her mat. Then she turned back. Then she decided. The meeting was at 6 in the evening in Chief Obiora's compound. It was large, 200 people at least, men in the front rows, women and children behind, the NGO representatives sitting to one side with their folders and their city clothes and their polite careful faces. Chief Obiora spoke first. He welcomed the NGO. He praised the community. He outlined the plan. He pointed to the map that had been taped to a board, the current map, the April map, the one that placed the borehole beside his compound. The NGO representative, a young woman named Miss Addis, smiled and nodded and said everything looked excellent. People began to murmur their agreement. Ngozi stood up. The murmuring stopped. Her mother pulled at her wrapper. She did not sit down. She said no. "I said no, sir," Ngozi said. "I said no to the borehole." Chief Obiora's eyes were on her. 200 pairs of eyes were on her. She felt every single one of them and she did not let herself feel anything except the paper in her hand, her notebook, the 3 maps, the numbers. "Explain yourself," Chief Obiora said. His voice was careful. He was not shouting. Shouting would have meant she had already become a problem worth taking seriously. The careful voice was worse, it was the voice of someone managing a situation they expect to end quickly. "The borehole position has changed 3 times since February," Ngozi said. Her voice was steady. She had not expected it to be steady. In February the plan showed it at the main square. In March it moved east. The current plan places it beside this compound. She held up her notebook. "I have the maps from all 3 meetings. Anyone who wants to see them can see them." A sound went through the crowd. Not agreement, not yet. But the particular sound of people whose private noticing has just been spoken aloud by someone else. "The main square position serves the whole village equally," she continued. "The current position adds between 5 and 50 minutes of walking distance for every household in Egukwota. 43 households. That includes women, children, and elderly people who already make 2 trips daily. She paused. The NGO came to serve the whole village, she said. Not part of it. She sat down. Her mother was gripping her arm so tightly it would leave a mark. The compound was very quiet. Chief Obiora looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at his son Emeka, who was looking at Ngozi with an expression that was not anger. Then the NGO representative, Miss Addis, spoke. "May I see the maps?" she said. What happened next took 40 minutes. Miss Addis examined the 3 maps. She asked questions, careful, professional questions, the kind that carry no accusation but arrive at the truth anyway. She asked when the position had been changed and who had requested the changes and whether those requests had been documented. They had not been documented. She asked what the original survey had identified as the optimal position for maximum community access. Someone found the original survey. It said the main square. She asked whether the community had been consulted on the position change. Nobody answered that question. Chief Obiora sat through all of it with the stillness of a man who is calculating. He was not a stupid man. He understood what was happening, the numbers, the maps, the questions, and he understood that the situation had moved past the point where it could be managed back into silence. He also understood who had moved it. He looked at Ngozi. She looked back at him without looking away. Something passed between them that was not friendship and not war, something more like the moment 2 people recognize each other's seriousness. Chief Obiora stood up. The borehole would be built at the main square, he said. As originally planned. He said it plainly, without explanation, without apology, in the voice of a man who had decided that the thing which could not be defended should simply be corrected. Whatever his reasons for the change had been, convenience, habit, the quiet accumulation of privilege, he was practical enough to know when to let them go. The compound erupted. Not in anger. In relief, the particular loud relief of people who have been holding their breath without knowing it. Ngozi walked home in the dark with her mother. Her mother did not speak for the first 5 minutes. This was not unusual. Her mother processed things at her own speed and the speed varied by how significant the thing was. Then she said, "You embarrassed the chief in front of 200 people." "I corrected a plan in front of 200 people," Ngozi said. He embarrassed himself. Ngozi. Mama. Her mother was quiet again. "Are you angry?" Ngozi asked. "No." A pause. "I am frightened." "There is a difference." "I know. Chief Obiora is not a man who forgets." "I know that too." "Then why?" "Because Mrs. Adana is 7 months pregnant and walking 45 minutes for water," Ngozi said. "That is why." "That is the whole reason." "It is not more complicated than that." Her mother walked beside her in the dark. Then she said something Ngozi had never heard her say before. "Your grandmother," she said, "used to say that the voice that shakes is still a voice. It still counts." Ngozi looked at her. "Was your voice shaking?" her mother asked. "Yes," Ngozi admitted. "But you spoke anyway." "Yes." Her mother nodded once. "Then your grandmother would have been pleased." They walked the rest of the way home in silence that felt, for the first time that evening, like peace. The borehole was built in 6 weeks. It went up at the main square, exactly where the original survey had placed it, and on the morning it was commissioned and the water ran for the first time, the women of Egu Quarter came first. All 43 households. Some of them came before sunrise. Mama Ezin's grandchildren ran all the way from the east end of the village and arrived out of breath and laughing and filled their clay pots and ran back. Ngozi stood at the edge of the square and watched. Mrs. Adana came with her husband. She was 8 months pregnant now and she moved slowly but she came. She filled her container. She stood up and looked across the square and found Ngozi and looked at her for a moment without speaking. Then she placed her hand briefly over her heart. Ngozi felt something move in her chest that she had no precise word for. Emeka came to find her 2 days later. He found her at the secondary school, just outside the gate after classes. He was still in his city clothes and he looked, this close, younger than he had seemed at the meeting. Somewhere behind the city confidence was a 26-year-old who had been watching something unfold that surprised him. Ngozi, he said. She looked at him. Yes. I want to ask you something. Ask. At the meeting. When you stood up. Did you know my father would agree? Ngozi thought about it honestly. No. Then why? Because right does not need a guarantee, she said. If it needed a guarantee, it would not be courage. It would just be calculation. Emeka looked at her for a long moment. You are 16, he said. Yes. Where did you learn to think like that? She looked at him. From watching what happens when nobody speaks, she said. That is a very good teacher. He nodded slowly. Then, unexpectedly, he said, the NGO representative. Miss Addis. She wants to meet you. She said to tell you that they have a youth advocacy program. For young people who understand how communities work. He paused. I told her you understand better than most people twice your age. Ngozi stared at him. She will be at the community center on Saturday, he said. If you want to come. He turned and walked back toward the village. Ngozi stood at the school gate and held what had just happened very carefully, like something that might break if she moved too fast. She went on Saturday. Miss Addis was exactly as she had seemed at the meeting, direct, careful, genuinely interested. She asked Ngozi questions for 40 minutes. About the maps, about how she had noticed the shift, about what she understood about water access and community planning and the way decisions get made in places where some voices are louder than others. Then she said, we have a 6-month fellowship. For young people between 16 and 22. It covers water access advocacy, community development, and civic leadership. It is based in Abuja, but there are 2 village participants selected each year. Ngozi sat very still. The selection is competitive, Miss Addis said. There is an application and an interview. The deadline is in 3 weeks. She slid a form across the table. I cannot promise you will be selected. But I can tell you that what you did at that meeting, the maps, the numbers, the research, that is exactly what this program is looking for. Ngozi picked up the form. She thought about her father's hands on the kitchen table, searching for reasons to be still. She thought about her teacher's salary and his careful silence. She thought about the voice that shakes is still a voice. I will apply, she said. She told her father that evening. He read the fellowship form slowly, twice, the way he read things that mattered. Then he set it down. Abuja, he said. Yes. 6 months. Yes, Baba. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, you know what I thought, when you stood up at the meeting? What? I thought, she is about to make a mistake. He paused. And then you spoke. And I thought, no. She is about to show us something. Ngozi looked at her father. I should have spoken myself, he said. I saw it. I saw everything you saw. And I sat down because I was afraid. He looked at his hands. You were also afraid. And you stood up anyway. Mama told me your mother saying. About the shaking voice. He smiled. A small, surprised smile. She said that. Yes. He picked up the fellowship form again. I will sign it, he said. Whatever you need from me, I will sign. The morning Ngozi left for the fellowship interview in Abuja, the whole of Egu Quarter came to see her off. Mama Ezin's grandchildren ran alongside the motorcycle that carried her bag to the road. Mrs. Adana stood at her gate holding her new baby, born 3 weeks early, healthy, loud, already making her opinions known, and raised one hand as Ngozi passed. Ngozi raised her hand back. The road stretched ahead of her and the village fell away behind her, and she was 16 years old and she had stood up in a compound full of 200 people and said no with a shaking voice, and the borehole was at the main square and a woman's baby had been born in a house with water close by and a fellowship form was in her bag, and none of it had required her to be fearless. It had only required her to be willing. That, she was learning, was enough. That was always enough. If this story made you think about a moment when you should have spoken but didn't, or a moment when you did and it mattered, share it in the comments. Your story belongs here. Like this video and share it with someone who needs to remember that one voice can change everything. And if you are not yet subscribed, do it now, because every week we bring you a story that proves what ordinary people can do when they choose not to be silent. The next story is already here. Don't miss it.